Welcome to Life Turns, the place where real emotions meet unforgettable lessons. Tonight, I want to take you into a story that begins with something so ordinary, just a bedtime moment with my son, but turned into one of the most powerful conversations of my life. It's about a child's words, spoken softly in the stillness of night, that completely changed my heart forever. I still remember that evening clearly. The house was quiet, the dishes were stacked away, and the day had finally slowed down. My son had been restless all afternoon, and I could sense he had something on his mind. But like most parents, I thought it was just another small worry about school, or maybe a fight with a friend. I couldn't have known that the words he was about to speak would leave me frozen, filled with both guilt and love all at once. He had already brushed his teeth, changed into his pajamas, and climbed into bed. I went in to tuck him in, like I always did. You know, as parents we often think we're the ones teaching lessons, guiding them, shaping their future. But that night, the roles completely reversed. That night, my son became my teacher. As I sat on the edge of his bed, I saw him staring at the ceiling, his small hands gripping the blanket. I whispered, "Everything okay, buddy?" He didn't answer right away. He took a deep breath, and then his voice cracked just a little as he asked, "Dad, are you happy?" That question hit me like a storm. I wasn't expecting it at all. Out of all the things a child could ask before bed, about monsters, homework, or tomorrow's breakfast, he asked if I was happy. For a moment, I didn't even know how to respond. I forced a smile and said, "Of course I'm happy. Why do you ask?" But kids, they see through us. They sense what we try to hide. He turned his face toward me and said, "Because sometimes you look sad. And I don't want you to be sad, Dad." My heart sank. I didn't even realize how much I had been carrying in front of him. The stress from work, the bills, the constant worries about whether I was doing enough for him, for our family, it had shown in my eyes, in my silence, in the weight of my shoulders. And my little boy had noticed. He was watching me more closely than I ever knew. I felt tears building up, but I didn't want to scare him. I just said softly, "Thank you for asking me that. It means a lot." But he wasn't done. He reached out, his small hand resting on mine, and whispered, "If you're sad, you can tell me. You don't always have to be strong." I can't explain what those words did to me. This was my son, barely old enough to understand life's struggles, yet he was offering me comfort. He was reminding me that love isn't just about providing. It's about being real, about being open, even with your child. That night, instead of tucking him in quickly and leaving the room, I stayed. We talked for a long time. He told me he sometimes worries when he sees me quiet, when I sit at the table lost in thought. He said he just wants me to smile more, because when I smile, he feels safe. Can you imagine that? A child connecting his sense of security, not to money or gifts, but to the simple expression on his father's face. I realized in that moment how much our emotions ripple through our children's lives. We think they don't notice when we're overwhelmed, but they do. They may not always have the words, but they feel it. And that night, my son reminded me of something I had forgotten. Happiness isn't something we find later. It's something we create, right here, in these everyday moments. As he drifted off to sleep, his words echoed in my heart. "You don't always have to be strong." I sat there in the dark, holding his hand, realizing that maybe true strength is not about hiding pain, but about being vulnerable enough to share it with the ones who love us most. When I finally kissed him goodnight and turned off the light, I walked out of his room a different person. His innocent question had opened my eyes to the truth. I had been so focused on being the provider, the protector, the problem solver, that I had forgotten to just be present, to smile, to laugh, to show him that happiness is possible even in the middle of struggles. That night, before I went to bed myself, I stood in front of the mirror and really looked at my reflection. I thought about how often I pushed my feelings aside, telling myself that my son didn't need to see them. But maybe he did. Maybe he needed to know that life has ups and downs, that even dad gets tired or sad, but that love and honesty can carry us through. And so I made a promise to myself. From that night forward, I would not just be the father who works hard and pays the bills. I would be the father who laughs at silly jokes, who sings in the car, who dances in the kitchen, who isn't afraid to admit when he's having a rough day. Because in the end, my son doesn't need a perfect father. He needs a happy one. The next morning, when the sunlight slipped through the curtains, I woke up with my son's words still heavy on my heart. "Dad, are you happy?" It wasn't just a bedtime question anymore. It had become a mirror, reflecting back everything I'd been ignoring. I walked into the kitchen, made myself some coffee, and for the first time in a long while, I sat quietly and thought about what happiness really meant. We live in a world that teaches us happiness comes from success, from money, from having it all figured out. But as I looked at my son's empty cereal bowl on the table, I realized that he didn't care about those things. He cared about me, whether I smiled, whether I laughed, whether I was truly present when we were together. That was his definition of happiness, and in a way, it's the purest one there is. Later that day, while dropping him off at school, I noticed how his little eyes kept glancing at me, checking to see if I was smiling. It was as if my expression was his weather forecast. If Dad looked heavy and tired, his day clouded over. If Dad smiled, the sun came out for him. That realization was both beautiful and painful, because it showed me just how much influence I had on his tiny world. On the drive back home, I thought about all the nights I had walked past his room with my shoulders weighed down by stress, thinking I was protecting him by keeping quiet. But the truth is, children don't just hear what we say, they absorb what we live. They learn by watching us. And I knew right then that I needed to start living differently. Not for me alone, but for him too. That evening, when I picked him up from school, I surprised him. Instead of heading straight home, I said, "How about some ice cream before dinner?" His eyes lit up instantly, and that smile of his, it was like sunshine breaking through the clouds. We sat together at a small table, both of us laughing at how fast the ice cream was melting, and for the first time in weeks, I felt truly alive. It wasn't about the ice cream, of course. It was about the moment, the togetherness. As he licked the last bit off his spoon, he looked at me and said, "You're smiling more today, Dad." My heart swelled. That tiny observation from him felt like a metal pinned on my chest. It meant he noticed. It meant he felt the difference. And in that simple statement, he reminded me again that happiness isn't something we wait for. It's something we create, even in the smallest gestures. When we got home that night, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in a while. I put on some music while cooking, and I actually danced around the kitchen with him. At first, he laughed at how silly I looked, but soon he joined in. We spun around, singing off-key, and I couldn't remember the last time I had seen him laugh that hard. It was as if all the heaviness I had been carrying started to dissolve, replaced by this warmth I hadn't felt in years. After dinner, when I tucked him into bed, he gave me a hug that lasted longer than usual. He whispered, "I like it when you're like this, Dad." My throat tightened, and I kissed his forehead. "Me too, buddy. Me too." Those few words, exchanged in the stillness of his room, carried more weight than any conversation I had ever had with adults. That night, lying in my own bed, I thought about how my son had managed to give me something no book, no seminar, no motivational speaker had ever been able to give me, a wake-up call straight to the heart. Children have a way of stripping life down to its purest truths. They don't care about your job title or how many zeros are in your paycheck. They care about whether you're there, whether you're smiling, whether you radiate love. The next week, I made some intentional changes. I cut down on overtime at work. I started eating dinner at the table with him instead of in front of my computer. I listened more and scrolled less. And do you know what happened? The laughter returned. The warmth returned. The warmth returned. Our home began to feel lighter, as if a shadow had lifted. But perhaps the biggest change wasn't in the house. It was in me. For years, I thought being strong meant carrying everything silently, never showing cracks, never admitting weakness. But now, I realized real strength is being open, letting my son see that I, too, am human. That yes, sometimes I get tired, sometimes I get sad, but I always find my way back because of love. One evening, about a week after that life-changing bedtime talk, we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. He leaned against me, quiet for a while, then said, "Dad, I like it when you're not always busy. You're more fun." I chuckled, but inside, his words struck deep. He wasn't asking for toys or trips. He was asking for me. My time, my joy, my attention. And isn't that what every child really wants? I looked at him and promised, "I'll always make time for us. You're the best part of my day." He smiled, and that smile, it was all the confirmation I needed. I knew I was on the right path. That night, when he fell asleep, I found myself whispering a prayer of gratitude. Gratitude for a son wise beyond his years. Gratitude for a second chance to show up not just as a provider, but as a joyful, present father. The more I reflected on it, the more I understood something simple yet profound. Sometimes the greatest teachers in life are the smallest voices in our home. We just need to stop long enough to listen. And when we do, we find truths that reshape us, truths that we carry forever. Time passed, and as the days turned into weeks, I noticed a remarkable change, not just in me, but in my son as well. The more I opened my heart, the more he opened his. We had always been close, but now it felt different, deeper, more genuine. There was no wall between us anymore. He didn't just see me as his father who fixed things and paid the bills. He saw me as a person, someone he could love, support, and even comfort when needed. One Friday evening, as we sat together on the couch watching cartoons, he leaned his head on my shoulder and said, "Dad, you're my best friend." I froze for a moment, overwhelmed by the purity of those words. Best friend. It wasn't something I expected, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. That small sentence told me everything, that my choice to be more present, to be more joyful, was building something priceless between us. I thought back to that first night, when his innocent question, "Are you happy?" had shaken me to my core. Back then, I hadn't realized just how far I drifted from the simple joys of life. I had been so caught up in surviving that I forgot how to live. But here, sitting with my son, sharing popcorn and laughter, I finally understood. Happiness doesn't come later, when everything is perfect. Happiness is built in these messy, beautiful, ordinary moments. The following week, his school hosted a family night. I almost skipped it because of work deadlines. But then, I remembered his little voice reminding me, "I like it when you're not always busy." So, I closed my laptop, changed my clothes, and showed up. The way his face lit up when he spotted me walking into that classroom, I'll never forget it. His smile was worth more than any paycheck. He grabbed my hand, pulling me proudly to his friends, introducing me as if I were a superhero. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. To him, I was. Later that night, after family night was over, we walked to the car hand in hand. He looked up at me and said, "Thanks for coming, Dad. You're always there when it matters." I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. Because for so long, I had believed that my worth as a father came from providing, from working harder. But he didn't care about any of that. All he wanted was me, my presence, my smile, my time. That night, as he slept peacefully in his room, I sat quietly in the living room, letting it all sink in. Children won't remember the money we spent, but they will remember how we made them feel. They'll remember the laughter, the hugs, the nights we sat together telling stories. My son's simple bedtime question had rewired the way I saw my role as a father. He had taught me the most important lesson. Love isn't proven by perfection. It's proven by presence. Months passed, and our bond only grew stronger. I noticed he began sharing more with me, about his friends, his dreams, even his fears. And I listened, really listened, because I finally understood how much it mattered. He no longer hesitated to open up, because he felt safe with me. And I no longer pretended to be unshakable, because I wanted him to know that strength and vulnerability can exist together. One night, much like the one when this all began, I went in to tuck him into bed. He looked at me with those same wide eyes and said, "Dad, are you happy now?" This time, without hesitation, I smiled and answered, "Yes, buddy. I really am." His face broke into the biggest grin, and he whispered, "Good. That means I can be happy too." I'll admit, I stepped out of his room and broke down. Not from sadness, but from an overwhelming wave of gratitude. To think that a child's heart could hold such wisdom, to think that his little voice could change the course of my life, it was humbling beyond words. I realized then that children don't just inherit our looks or our habits. They inherit our energy, our emotional presence. If we carry joy, they carry joy. If we carry burdens, they feel the weight too. From that day on, I made it my mission to live differently. Not perfectly, not without struggles, but with intention. I laughed more freely, hugged more tightly, and spoke more gently. I worked hard, yes, but I also rested, played, and savored the moments that truly mattered. Because in the end, it wasn't about being the strongest or the most successful father. It was about being the happiest version of myself, so my son could learn to be the happiest version of himself. Looking back now, I can say with certainty that bedtime conversation changed everything. It was just a few words, spoken in the quiet of the night, but they cracked open my heart and showed me the truth. Sometimes, the smallest voices carry the greatest wisdom. Sometimes, the ones we think we are teaching are the very ones teaching us. And so, to every parent listening to this story, I want to say this: don't underestimate the power of your child's words. Don't ignore the questions they ask at bedtime or the worries they whisper in the dark. Sometimes, those words are not just questions, they're invitations. Invitations to slow down, to open up, to live with more love and more presence. Because one day, they'll grow up. One day, those bedtime talks will end. And when that day comes, the question is, will they remember a parent who was always busy, always stressed? Or will they remember a parent who smiled, who laughed, who listened, and who was truly there? That choice is ours to make. My son made me realize it before it was too late. And for that, I will be forever grateful. His words, spoken softly one night before bed, changed my heart forever.